Masters, welcome to another episode of Path to Mastery. And today we're with Mr. Brant Cooper. Brant, how are you, sir?
I'm good. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, man. Thank you. Thanks for being a speaker, author, and disruptor, man. That's what's a disruptor anyway, man? Let's just start right there. Let's get right into it.
Uh, I've been known to, poke hornets' nests here and there, So yeah, I like fixing things, right? I mean, smart analytical people like to break down problems and fix things. Well, sometimes there are people that don't want them fixed.
Hmm. Yeah, make things better,
That's right. I mean,
right?
that's our
I
purpose, I think. So
I love that conversation. We'll get back into that too in a minute. Let me just tell our listeners a little bit about you. You are a New York Times bestselling author of The Lean Entrepreneur, CEO of Moves the Needle, over 2 decades of experience helping companies bring innovative products to market. You blend agile design thinking and lean methodologies. Let me get my grammar in place to ignite entrepreneurial action within large organizations. So thanks for and your website is the leanentrepreneur.co. So thanks for again joining us today.
yeah, cool. Thanks for having me.
So let's actually talk about the disruption, because I don't know if you're familiar with my audience, but a lot of salespeople and real estate agents, and especially real estate, we're in an industry that is really being disrupted now as we speak. A lot of changes. So let's talk a little bit. Let's have a conversation about disruption. So how do you know, or I guess I'm trying to think of the right way to ask this question. Like we all have these great ideas, right? Like everybody's got these ideas, but then we hardly ever implement it. And then someone else does something and you're like, man, how come I didn't think of that? Right. Like Uber or like this TaskRabbit or so many other things that are happening. Right.
Well, I think the crazy thing is that you can't really predict whether it's going to be disruptive or not. And that's sort of the mythology of like the Silicon Valley startup and even inside of these large companies, they kind of figure they can sit around a boardroom table, and if they think really hard, they'll think of some disruption.
Mm,
And it doesn't really happen that way. And so I think like the example that you brought up, especially in real estate, disruption is happening whether any of us like do anything about it or not, right? So disruption can be caused by a bunch of different things. Disruption can be caused by technology invention that then, takes over the world. It could be caused by a global pandemic. It could be, caused by other acts of God. I think that the way I describe it nowadays is that we're moving, when we moved from an agricultural society to the industrial age, that was massive societal disruption. Everything changed. Education, government, business, the way workers worked. I'm sure even like, real estate was way different, right? But we're going through that level of disruption again. We're going from the industrial age into the digital age. The fact that we're all running around with computers in our pockets,
mm,
this is like, I don't know, 10,000 times more powerful than the first computers that were sitting in the very center of governments and corporations back in the 50s or whatever, right? I mean, it's so powerful. We're running around with computers in our pockets, and it's changing absolutely everything about how society functions. So government's going to be restructured. Education's going to be restructured. How we grow and manage businesses is going to be fundamentally restructured. And so this disruption based on the digital revolution is kind of happening to us. And so I guess what I try to teach people and try to help figure out is, well, how do we make it work for us? Right? So how do we like not just be passive and this is all happening to us, but how can we actually, go out and try to shape what's happening in order to benefit ourselves and our families and our communities and our jobs and our businesses? If we're passive, it's just going to happen to us.
mm.
But if we, sort of learn how to take the bulls by the horn, then maybe we can make it work for all of us.
Yeah. It's funny. I was talking to somebody earlier today, not on a podcast, but a different conversation, consulting conversation, and the Blockbuster versus Netflix conversation. I actually brought the conversation. I said, listen, if you could go back to Netflix and spend Friday night in line and, get a movie. And he's like, yeah, that wouldn't be too bad. I'm like, dude, seriously? Like, and it's kind of funny. He's like, yeah, he goes, well, he's younger. So he's like, you know what? Honestly, I didn't grow up with that. So that might not be a bad thing, but it's just interesting him saying that, because in his mind, it's like, well, that actually doesn't even sound too bad. You know what I mean? To kind of
I'm certainly old enough to remember it. I miss the neighborhood video store. And I'll tell you why. Because you could go find any video there. It's actually hard to find any video now. Like,
yeah, that's true.
And the other thing is, it's gotten more expensive. All of this disruption was supposed to make this stuff inexpensive. Listen, all of these stores, these streaming services, they don't have like brick and mortar stores. They don't have to manage discs. They don't have to buy new, all of that hardware infrastructure is gone, and yet prices go up. It's insane.
Well, you don't have to leave your house though. I mean, you don't have to do anything. You don't have to drive. You don't even have to cook dinner anymore, right? You can have somebody delivering dinner every night.
I know. I'm terrible though. Like when I was married, I enjoyed walking down the street, grabbing a pint at the local pub while I'm picking up the movie and coming back. I mean, that was like, there's a social aspect that young person's talking about that actually is valuable. And having to get in your car maybe and drive 20 minutes through 300 stoplights is maybe, it's great to avoid that. But back in the day, I could walk down the street. That was pretty nice.
Hey, I still remember, selling in 1985, there were no cell phones. There was no GPS. You had a map. You took the map with you, the big book, right? And then the evolution from that was you'd go on to the computer and print, like, the MapQuest was there. Now you could print pages and bring those with you. It's nuts how different it is right now.
It is.
But I'm sorry, you go.
Oh, I was just going to say, that story reminds me of that transition period where I had like a phone that had like really poor battery. And so, you'd get off of the plane or whatever, and you'd be in a city and you'd be trying to download the map because you had to figure out how to get to your hotel. And then the phone would die. And so then you actually had to like go and plug in at the airport on the arrival side so you could call UberX or tell the taxi driver. I don't know. It was kind of funny. There was that period where it was actually not quite in the new era and not quite out of the old era that was kind of painful, but it's pretty easy now.
Yeah, I think it's everything. It's all perspective, right? I mean, it's almost like you can't survive now without a cell phone or navigation. You don't even need navigation in a car anymore, right? Because it's on your phone now. That used to be a big deal, right? You buy a car, you get navigation. It's like, it's just amazing how things just continue to exponentially just evolve and get better and more efficient. So what would you say to somebody listening to this, like when it comes to like innovation and technology and like, because things are changing so fast, it's hard to keep up sometimes.
Well, it's really funny. I'm going to go back to what that young person said to you again. I actually think that you got to zag when everybody else is zigging. And I think people are becoming over-reliant on the technology to automate stuff. And your audience knows, both of them, real estate and salespeople know, it's all really about the human connection and the relationships that you establish. And so while everybody else is trying to computerize all of that, automate all of that, the more human you make it, I actually think that puts you a step ahead. And even though there's so much technology, your competitive advantage is not the technology anymore because everybody has it. So it's not even that patents don't matter that much to most startup entrepreneurs. It's the insights that you get into your customer that are your competitive advantage. And so what I would say to your audience about technology, great, leverage it how you need it. Don't leverage it just because it's a cool tool. Leverage it how you need it, but maintain the ability to discover insights about your customers that nobody else has. And that's your competitive advantage.
I love it. Yeah, that's great advice. It's funny. I was on a call yesterday or meeting with a guy. He's into his company's called Get Leverage, and they basically automate everything. Like that's what they specialize in. But something interesting he said was that, the first thing we do with people is we look at their systems and their processes, And then we decide what should be automated and what shouldn't be automated, because frankly, some things doesn't make sense to automate. Like people try to automate too much now, where,
Totally.
you know, so if you could take your assistant 3 seconds to do something, why automate it? Right. When it might work out better by having her spend, 10 seconds to do it.
Yeah, I was helping this entrepreneur in Australia once, and he was trying to sell software to restaurants. And and so obviously if you're going to sell, the software system to a restaurant, you got to get in touch with the owner or the manager, whoever makes that decision. And yet he was posting this stuff on some sort of Facebook group. And I asked him, I go, well, why are you trying to find restaurant managers in this Facebook group? I mean, that's most likely you're hitting whatever social media consultant they've hired or whatever. And he said, yeah, I know. I said, you should be cold calling them. And he's like, yeah, my investor says that's not scalable. And I'm all like, yeah, what's not scalable is no sales. I mean, that's not scalable.
Yeah.
And so, the whole hustle aspect of it gets lost often in the automation. And so, the way I try to think about it is you automate. Marketing is automating the part of sales process you've already figured out. So you go figure out something in person, right? And so you're a Renaissance salesperson who knows how to actually go learn how to overcome objections. Okay, well, so I hear the same 5 objections every time. Okay, now I'm going to create a frequently asked questions page and put that on my website. And I'm going to steer my people to my audience to that website, because I want to overcome those objections before I even talk to that person on the phone. So now I've just automated what I just learned in person. The learning in person is key. The automation hopefully saves time and creates, sales capacity and velocity. But you have to learn it in person first and then automate what you've learned.
Yeah, great point. Yeah, absolutely. What we're doing is in real estate right now, creating these similar to what you just said, consumer awareness guides. Essentially, it's a way to give people information without selling them or pushing them on it, like answer all the questions that they have in their mind ahead of time, so that when they decide to make a choice, obviously we're going to, be top of mind at the least, and maybe we'll get a shot at it. But it's really just about giving information and answering those questions and dealing with those objections ahead of time. Really similar.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this, because, you said the magic question. Everybody says, well, that's not scalable these days. Is that like the thing to say now to sound cool, or do people even know how to scale? Like, right. It's like, cause it's actually, you could scale cold calling. You could hire ISAs. You could hire a sales team to make those calls for you. But like, why do people say it's not? Cause I hear that so many times now every day.
Yeah, because people tend to look at the successes out there after the boulder is tipped over the top of the mountain and is rolling downhill. And they go, wow, look how big that and powerful that boulder is and how fast it's moving. And they can't see King Sisyphus, pushing that boulder up the hill for years and years and years. All of the learning and the iterating and the failing and all of those things that got the boulder to the top of the hill. And so the scalable part is
they just want to be at the top of the hill now.
Exactly. Right. No, exactly. And so it's like, oh no, see how they do it when the boulder's running downhill? Do that. And it's like, no, but we don't have the product right yet. And so the 2 biggest things that kill Silicon Valley style startups, one is there's not a big enough market. And number 2 is premature scaling. And so, you see some of these horror stories, Uber was one, and the co-working space, what was it, At Work or whatever that was, WeWork. And what happens is that the investors are just trying to flip their shares. So this happened during the .com boom too, right? It's they don't really care whether the company is viable or if they figured stuff out. If as an early investor, I can convince the retail market that this thing's going to be huge, and so I can flip my shares at a huge profit, then that's actually a lot of the reasons why the big venture capitalists and private equity attempt to scale prematurely. But when you hear it in the small world, like this Australian, investor or whatever, he's just copying the big boys. He doesn't really understand. He probably actually was never, growing a business, him or herself. And so they're just sort of, that's why it's like you said, it's hip.
Sounds cool, man. Hey,
yeah,
it's
exactly.
not scalable. I can't do that.
Not scalable, man.
I don't want to do anything. As a matter of fact, I just want to turn on a system that pours money into my bank account.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yep.
That's it.
Yeah.
If Redfin can do it and Zillow can do it, I can do it.
Right.
Right. That's real estate. Well, so let's switch gears. I want to talk about your book, The Lean Entrepreneur. Tell us about the book. What's the essence of the book?
Yeah. Well, so the Lean Entrepreneur, the fundamental part of it is around this entrepreneurial spirit. And really that entrepreneurial spirit is about empathy. So understanding your customers deeply. It doesn't mean going out and asking them what they want and doing what they say, but it's understanding why they're saying what they're saying. It's understanding what the outcome is. And a matter of fact, again, I think a lot of, Renaissance, what we used to call Renaissance salespeople or consultative salespeople know how to do that anyway, because they know that's how they're going to close a deal. But so it's the understanding that human being. But it's not necessarily just going and then building what they say. You have to understand the environment, the culture, the real needs that they're driving at. And then the second E in my 3 E's, empathy, the second E is experiment. So I'm going to run disciplined, purposeful experiments to validate or invalidate my assumptions. And again, a lot of great salespeople do this all the time, right? Here's my sales script, try it. And if it doesn't work, I'm going to change it. Well, that was an experiment. And when it didn't work, I iterate on it until I find what works. Now I can take that sales script and pass it on to the other people who are, sort of the more turnkey salespeople. They can't figure that out, but give me a script, I can go do it. So the experiment, like in a product development point of view, is the same thing. Are people willing to pay for it? Well, I can run an experiment to see if they might, pull out their wallet and see if they'll pay for something. So there's all sorts of assumptions that are built into a business model, and we can run purpose-built experiments to try to see if the customer will behave in a way that indicates that they want the value and they're willing to pay the value. And we can cut through all of our assumptions rather than, building out a whole sales team or building out a whole product for several years, building stuff that nobody wants. I want to experiment to try to figure it out before I invest too much time, money, and resources. And then the third E is evidence-based decision-making. Or evidence-informed. I think, intuition and experience is important, but you also want to be able to leverage those insights I talked about earlier, as well as data, because those will cut through our biases. Like, what is it that I really want versus what is the market telling me? And so the evidence is market-based evidence that instructs what my next step should be. And so those are sort of the 3 founding, fundamental principles of Lean Entrepreneur.
Interesting. That's awesome. I'm trying to think of like how to apply those into real estate. Like obviously empathy when you're working with people, figuring out what the goal is, how can you help them achieve that? What are some of the challenges? Experiment, it's the crazy market right now. Honestly, yep. I mean, we're putting properties on the market at, what I would think a house would sell for 500,000 is selling for like 620. It's insane. Yep. And then if you go to the evidence part, well, evidence is showing that the appraisal should come in at 525 for somehow this house is coming in at 600,000. So it's a little strange right now.
Yeah. So the way I would apply this stuff is probably in the marketing and maybe programs that you're trying, right? I mean, so at a very basic level, you can run experiments to see like, okay, well, what's the messaging that will work now during the pandemic for me? What will get me people coming and knocking on my door and ringing my bell or calling me versus the competition, right? So you can run experiments, but I try to differentiate between just throwing stuff against the wall and actually thinking about it in terms of a hypothesis. If I do X, Y percentage of my potential customers will behave in way Z. And so I'm going to predict what that is. So if I run a particular Facebook ad with this particular messaging, then this is what's going to happen when these people land on my website and download, one of these documents that you're talking about. So you put it inside of an experiment because that allows you to then judge whether it's working or not. And it's not just like a finger in the wind. It's like, no, I'm seeing an uptick in the number of people that are contacting me. So that messaging's working. I'm going to double down on that. And so the evidence comes from running the experiment, or the evidence comes from the empathy work where you hear about, like, you know, what's really keeping these people up at night, you know, and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I got it. Okay. So, I mean, like example, if you're running A/B ads on Facebook, right? Or you send out an email campaign, you got A/B testing.
That's
send
right.
out with this title versus this title, which title is getting a lot more opens, etc.
Right. That's a great example of a very, you know, straightforward digital experiment. What we do when we're working with startups or corporates, they can be really elaborate experiments. I mean, you can do whole pop-up stores that are essentially an experiment. You know, again, during the pandemic, it's pretty difficult. But if you could imagine, like, I mean, it's just kind of like trying to quote unquote think out of the box. You know, go do a pop-up store at a farmer's market, you know, where you're giving away free water and also you've got your real estate stuff there or something. I mean, just like, it's being entrepreneurial, right? It's trying to, like, how do I zag when everybody else is zigging, and run an experiment to see if that actually makes me stand out. And if it stands out, then the evidence will suggest that you're standing out, and then that's a program that you should double down on.
Yeah. Awesome. Let me ask you this. So, biggest challenge you can help our listeners overcome, the loss of entrepreneurial spirit. What do you mean by that?
Well, I think that we get stuck in best practices. We get stuck in how we've always done it. We can get into these routines. You know, one of the things that was interesting to me, so I'm working with, you know, large enterprises. We go into the pandemic and they're not going to do any more innovation work. And I'm talking to the leaders and they're saying, like, well, we just need to buckle down. And I go, well, when you tell me that you just want to buckle down, what you're telling me is that you just want to go back to what you know, and you want to execute harder in order to hit your numbers. And I go, but what do you know anymore? Your small business customers are going out of business. Your consumers don't have any budget. You're going to go try to sell them harder during this time? Is that actually going to result in you hitting your numbers? So that's an example of them getting into execution mode, where the only thing that they kind of can think of doing is executing harder. Whereas if they paused and they said, well, let me apply entrepreneurial spirit, because we're facing all of this uncertainty and we don't really know what to do. So the entrepreneurial spirit would be, well, why don't I pick up the phone and talk to 5 of my customers and just see how they're doing, and then using that information to figure out if there's a way that I can provide value to those customers that will also benefit me and my business. And so here's a couple of ideas that we come up with. You know, we get a team of people around, we brainstorm ideas on how we might fix our current situation. Well, so then you run experiments to test those ideas. So that's starting to apply what I could call the entrepreneurial spirit when you're facing this uncertainty, instead of just doubling down on what you were doing 6 months ago because it worked 6 months ago.
Yeah, I get it. So you're getting outside of the norm, to thinking outside of the box a little bit. You know what's actually been interesting is real estate has evolved since the pandemic, where it's really made us look at a lot of the things. We've created a lot more efficiencies, at least maybe not every agent, but like my last 4 or 5 listing, and I don't go in as many listing presentations anymore. I do more coaching now, but I like to still go to stay sharp, and I focus on, higher end properties. And I've been doing these presentations via Zoom, and it's much more efficient. I'm able to actually pull up and show, my presentation. I feel like it's even better. Yeah. Right. And I don't know. I actually love it. I think it's helped. And then the virtual, it's like you using Matterport tours, you're using all these virtual. I think the next thing is like virtual reality headsets where you're going to do tours of the house. I don't know. I just see a lot of things happening in the real estate world.
Yeah, no, I think it'll be, well, what's funny to me is about none of it was predictable, right? I mean, if everybody was going to guess, they would have guessed that everything was going to crash. And so what we've seen is a decline in real estate in downtown San Francisco and downtown New York, and it's going up everywhere else.
There's no inventory.
It's just is completely unpredictable, I think. But anyway, I think there is some benefits out of this in the sense that everybody's kind of become acclimated to video, right? And so there's a ways now to do even the empathy work that I'm talking about. You've got a bunch of people on your webinars. The questions that you're getting there, that's way more efficient way for you to learn what the needs are of your own audience, because you're doing all of this stuff on video.
Yeah.
So I hope I hope part of that remains. I also think what's interesting is all sorts of the specialty video tools that are coming out now, right? I mean, before it was like Zoom and that was about all we had. And now you've got all sorts of very specific communications platforms for specific markets. So like you're talking about a virtual reality for real estate, you could do, like, somebody's going to come up with virtual reality where you're still showing the house. Like, you've got an avatar there and you're leading a couple through their avatars. So it's going to be like completely redoing what it was, 10 years ago. Absolutely. Instead of just forcing everybody to do that on their own. So then that relationship gets reestablished, which is exciting, right? I mean, I think that's like, we all just thought like, oh, nobody's going to read books anymore, and nobody needs real estate agents anymore, and nobody needs this anymore. But that was just this intermediate period where you get beyond that and technology gets sophisticated enough, it will replicate what we did before all of the technology, just sort of online. And so the relationships reform and reestablish. And so, yeah, the people that are out there on the cutting edge of that stuff, they have the advantage because they'll get those customer insights first.
Yeah. I think a good example of that is, well, I think going backwards a little bit, like you talked about earlier, sometimes just getting on the phone with somebody and having a conversation. Or, I mean, if you think about like, Amazon going out and buying Whole Foods, it's almost contradictory to what Amazon, right? Like, you got this online digital marketplace, and then they go and buy a chain of stores where people can actually go and pay astronomical amounts of money to shop, but it's the community, right?
Yeah.
I think bringing that back is, I think that's important right now.
I think it's going to come back. I did an interview with the CEO of a bank in Australia, and her bank was already digitized before the pandemic. But a lot of the competition wasn't. And so right when the pandemic hit, again, they did this zagging while everybody else was zigging. All of the other banks are all like, here's how you do internet banking. Here's how you can sign up for internet banking. And instead, this bank said, listen, we're in the same situation you are. This sucks. Everybody's home. If you actually just want to talk to somebody, give us a call. And we'll just and here's free consultation for financial services because we know that you're running into problems. And so to me, that's a great example of what you're saying, is that the next zag is going back to the human relationships, but with the technology where it's beneficial. But it's just that technology can't replace our human relationships.
Yeah. I'm actually doing a presentation in February, and the presentation's called, ironically, you've talked about the phone a couple of times. It's called The Gold Mine in Your Pocket. And it's about picking up the phone and getting, not just all the people in the phone, like your database, but we all have these huge CRMs that we just rely on sending, emails and all this other stuff.
Man. And no, that's great.
So much opportunity.
It drives me crazy. My company was as big as 16, 17 people a couple of years ago. I shrunk it back down because I was tired of managing everybody, to be honest. But one of the things that drove me crazy was that it would take 2 or 3 days to get things done, because everybody was relying on the digital aspects of the phone instead of the communications.
Great
it's
example.
Like Slack, this, that, emails back and forth. And I'm like, pick up the freaking phone.
Yeah. You know what? What's happening lately, and I've noticed this, is kind of a new trend of like using Loom. Are you familiar with Loom?
Yeah.
Yeah, like just a short video, like, hey, here's what's up. And instead of you don't even have to have a meeting now, right? It's a way to actually eliminate meetings, and so it's awesome. I love it.
I love it. And I love the philosophy too. I don't know, about 10 years ago, I was talking to a guy that does lean selling. And I'm sure that you've run into this and have talked about it, but the amount of time it takes between when you can answer a question, and when you have to go and find the answer and then give it to, I mean, that could be the time it takes to lose the deal, right? So back in the day when I was living through the .com world, it was super common for the salesperson to either have to go back and ask engineering a question about something before they could give that technical response to whoever they were trying to sell. And so it was actually, you know, if it took a couple of days, you were okay. Today, you don't have a couple of days. Yeah. And so if you have a Loom, that's awesome. Or, you know, you have to get your own ability yourself to be able to answer those questions. But that's why like a database of Looms is perfect, right? Because you could send that response right away. You have to close that gap or you'll lose the deal.
Or just a short, hey, I'm going to send you a quick, like, hey, you got a question? Here's the answer to the question, right? Without having to go type everything and, make sure it's precise and just like, bang. I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
All right. So let me ask you this. Well, first off, how do our listeners get a copy of your book? How do they get in touch with you if they want to learn more about what you're up to?
Yeah, sure. So, I'm Brant Cooper on all social media. I've got a Brant's Rant on YouTube that I do every week. That's kind of fun. The book is, all available on Amazon. I've got a new book project. I just turned in the manuscript a couple of weeks ago. So that'll be out in 2021. And if people want to ask me about that, that's cool. But generally, Brant Cooper on all social media, brant@brantcooper.com. If you want to send me an email, I respond to everybody. So yeah, look forward to
you actually respond to all your emails. You don't have like a bot doing it for you?
No, I respond to all of those as long as they're not spamming me. And then I,
Got it. All right. Fair enough. Well, let me ask you this. You had sent a question, and it was, why is there so much disruption occurring now? So I know we talked a little bit, we did talk about disruption, but I don't know that we answered that question. Or maybe we did.
I think that was really I think it's the digital revolution. I mean, I think so. It just is rippling through all aspects of society. And so I actually think it's the source of a lot of turmoil in the world because people are anxious and they don't really know what's happening except that things, there's like, I put this sentence in my book, but right there, there's that old phrase that says, if you keep doing the same thing and expecting different results, that's the definition of insanity, right? That's sort of the cliche. Well, what if you keep trying the same thing and you expect the same results, but now it doesn't work anymore? Right? I mean, so that's fear. That's anxiety. That makes people super uncomfortable. And so I think that's a lot of the turmoil in the world right now, to be honest, is people just like, stuff doesn't work anymore and government doesn't work anymore and education isn't preparing our kids anymore. And our work, keeps like reorganizing and laying off and yet they can't grow anymore. And so it's like stuff just isn't working. And so people are like understandably anxious about it. And that's the disruption that we feel. And that's really what the next book is about and why we need to change how we act and how we, sort of bring our knowledge and experience to the world in order to like make this stuff work again. I'm optimistic. We'll get around the corner. But I really think that it's on us to do it, not us sitting back and waiting for, government and philanthropists and big tech. I'm not sure they have our best interest at heart. So we got to do it ourselves. And it's really along those same lines I was talking about: empathy, experiment, evidence, finding a balance in our life. I call equilibrium, and then applying ethics. And I think that last one is super important. We can't lose sight of our values. And so we need to treat each other with respect and with ethics. And that's how we'll get around this corner and make the world a better place.
Awesome, man. Well, hey, I just want to say I appreciate you. I may have to back this up and steal that last quote there for Facebook when you talked about I know the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and expecting a different result. But the other one, I think you had said like the definition of frustration is like doing something that's always worked and then all of a sudden it doesn't work anymore.
Exactly.
And you're still trying to do it, right? Something along those lines. I don't know if I'm saying it right, but
no, that's good. Yep. No, that's exactly right.
All right, my friend. Anything I didn't ask you that I should have? Anything I missed?
No, I don't think so. It's a fun conversation.
All right. Well, it's nice to meet you. Appreciate your time. And yeah, man. Awesome. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.